Okay, so what happens in the student introduction? So we explain the coursework, we explain to them in particular the advantages, what they get out of it, what is the benefit to them. We explain the mechanics in detail, the steps, the marking process, and we go through some examples. The key aspect, I think, is to develop these marking criteria with the students together, to give them a feeling of engagement. Of course, I steer them towards what I think is reasonable, useful, conducive to kind of the learning, and so that they see how reports in our school typically are marked, and what they need to do to write a good report that gets appropriate marks in here. But they need to have a sense of ownership. So students voted, for example, on the on the weight of these assessment criteria, and they added bits and pieces to them. Still, of course, behind the scenes as a lecturer, I'm very much in control of this process, but the fact of going through them and engaging the students really makes them part of the exercise. And this is, for example, what we came up with. In the first section, it's just based on structure, to just guide the students to what are the formal elements that need to be there in my report. For example, is it written in prose with no equations, which was one of the criteria here? Does it end with a reference list in the correct format, and so on, spelling, grammar. Next part is writing. Again, students decided on 2 marks for that. Is it written in full English, full sentences, correct punctuation? Is it the correct length? And then finally, the remaining part is the content. So is actually what they write about, is it correct? Is it logically presented? Does it relate to the experiment they're going to do later on? And for example, is really the other references in the text, and various bits and pieces like that. In the this was how we implemented it in the first year. Students found actually that kind of marking in such a kind of a simple marking scheme, just giving a few marks up and down, which is probably like a lecturer would mark it. Yeah, I mean, you would mark maybe 60, next step is 65, you wouldn't go any farther than that. Students go in steps of 10 for this year roughly, found it too coarse, and we actually gave them marks out of 100 for the next one. How was it implemented online? So here's your typical submission page. The student logs in with their personal credentials. Because they're enrolled in that module, they see a submission page. They can upload a file. In this case, because we wanted to make sure that it's only 500 words, there's no formatting with it, there's no equations, we forced them to submit it as a text file. Gave them some introduction what it be. So text should be 300 to 500 words long, plain text, and so on. Needs to correspond to marking criteria. And actually this uploading interface also checked whether, for example, the word count was not exceeded, and rejected that in this case. So once the submission exercise is complete and students download, they see an interface like this. This here would be as the students have completed their marking, but before completing a marking, students would select one essay, select an essay, download it, and you'll see something like this then in the next page. So here's the text of the essay, 500 words, and then there's a marking template down here underneath that reflects the structure into that we had before: structure, writing, content, a few hints here kind of the main questions. For example, is it written in prose with no equations? Yes, no, partly, and then feedback to be added for each of those, and a pull down section for the marks to make sure they're in the right range. And once the students have, so here's more of a detail of that. For example, here a sample comment would be for the first one: reference list is missing, key information, look up how to make proper references, because that's one of the key things students need to learn at this, how to actually reference properly in a scientific report. And this one here, for example, then in the end got 6 out of 10. So in the end, once the students have completed this process, they would see here for all 6 essays they were asked to give feedback on and mark that it's completed, and they can give then some feedback on the entire exercise. And we asked them 3 questions here. So was the peer assessment exercise helpful to you? What was not so helpful? And any other suggestion? And we'll come back to the evaluation of that later on. Once the process is complete, I as a lecturer, for example, would go through and look, for example, for this one author here, what has this author been given by his peers. So in this case here, this actually has seen 7 markers due to the statistical distribution, and I see the marks in the different categories, and I see the overall marks, and I see, for example, that on average this student was given 5.83 out of 10. However, there's one marker here who gave him a 9. That clearly is out of line. The system flagged that for me. I had a look at this and found, well, that's indeed, this marker didn't really have a justified reason to give this student such a high mark, so I actually manually excluded that. Typically about 10 to 15% of the marks would be included in general. This is what students see at the end once the results are released to them. So here they see the average mark in their 3 categories: structure, writing, content, and the average mark that they got for their essay, plus in each category the written feedback of the markers in randomized order.